Hey everyone, how are you? My name is Alex, and welcome back to Build Plus. In today's episode of Build Plus, we are going to be focusing on the Forest Village and why this does not exist in vanilla Minecraft and what it might look like if it were actually added into the game. So, let's get right into it. Before we begin, if you enjoyed this video, you can show support by leaving a like, and if you want to see more, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell. This helps me out and keeps me bringing great content to you. Thanks so much, and let's get right into it. Just like the Mesa Village and the Cave Village, I decided that I wanted to take the same approach and start with deciding where I wanted the village to actually be. And obviously, there's trees all over the place, and there was a part of me that really didn't want to have to deal with all of the trees. And then I thought to myself, it just sort of makes sense to have some form of civilization right up against water, because, water being the source of life and all that good stuff. So, because of that, I decided it would be best to build the village somewhat close to a body of water. And I was basically at this point just flying around looking to see where would be the best, flattest area to build up against that also had a body of water. And I didn't want, I was looking at the river, but the problem with the river is that it's a river biome, and that would make this a river village instead of a forest village. So I ended up actually going with this little lake that you guys see right here that my fist is kind of going over. I liked this whole little spot right here because it was still in the forest biome, but it was also kind of close to the river, so the placement I felt like was just the most appropriate placement given the circumstances. So I came to a decision, and my decision was that I was going to make the village center in this particular type of village serve two purposes. The first purpose is that this would be a well, but the second purpose is that it would also be the leather worker. So what I decided was that I would feature andesite in the majority of, or basically all of the builds in some way or another, to make that sort of be the thing that made the forest village the forest village. And I've done that with the cave village and the mesa village as well. And so it just sort of made sense to kind of go that route, being as that's the route that I've taken with the other two videos. So for this one, I wanted the base to be andesite like you see here, and I wanted it to be a well, but I also wanted it to be elongated almost, so it would kind of look a bit like a water trough, even though it's not a water trough, and also accommodate the fact that there would be a cauldron sitting on top of this thing. And this was another thing with me where I wanted to have that in there, because I was kind of thinking of the old school vanilla wells that went really far down into the ground and were actually kind of intimidating. And I liked that because that's the way that a well looks in real life. So I kind of wanted to have that there, or have that be featured there. So, yeah, and I'm very happy with this particular style of well. I like it a lot because it has kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say a colonial look, but it kind of does. There's just something about the look of this. I wasn't thinking about one thing in particular, but I really like the way that this came out. To me, it's really cute, and it feels like something that could actually be in vanilla Minecraft, in a sense. So that's, basically what I did, and it was very hard. I want to point that out. Very hard to move around in this space because it was just, there were so many trees everywhere, and I really didn't want to get rid of trees. I tried really hard not to get rid of trees, so you'll have to excuse the fact that I get kind of bumped and bounced around a lot in here, and I'm kind of struggling to move around things often because of the fact that I have very tight quarters to work in. So, yeah, but anyways, I'm really, really happy with this well and the way that it came out. I do love it quite a bit. there's something about it, like, fits into my build style, but to me, it still looks like something that could be in vanilla Minecraft. Yeah, and the last thing that I did here was just, like, add in some water, and there it is, and it'll get more decorative later on, don't worry, it's gonna get prettier. And just like the first and second episode, I decided to map out the paths and where I wanted them to be, and I purposely didn't get rid of all of the grass. I decided to leave it there and have it be a more like modeled path in a sense so that it would look like it was really plunked down in the middle of this forest. And that's kind of the way that villages look anyways in vanilla Minecraft. Like the paths aren't like absolutely perfectly mowed. So I thought that would be a lot of fun to have it look as vanilla as possible. So yeah, and I did go underneath the trees too, which I don't think is the best decision, but like I said, I didn't want to take away the trees from the forest village. So in the end, this is what we ended up with here, all of these different paths. And it's I think the layout's fine for what it is. I feel like it could be a little bit better, but it's not the worst thing that I've ever done. So it's okay. And despite my best effort to avoid doing this, I did have to remove some trees. It just sort of had to be done in order to fit in buildings. And I really didn't want to do this, but it was necessary because it's like some trees have to move in order for buildings to actually go here. Otherwise, it's not a village without places for the villagers to live. So, that's how that happened. But I was still pretty sparing with what I removed. I also thought it would be really cute to put some of these clay pots around with a few saplings planted in them to give this a bit of life in a sense, but also make it look like it's featuring the forest because of these plants that are here. And I really am very proud of this idea. I think it's absolutely adorable, and I'm glad that I did it because I think it does tie the whole center together quite a bit and make this look really nice. Now, I time-lapsed this because if I had not have done that, this clip alone would have been like a good 15 minutes long. Because it actually took me a really long time to build the same thing that I have built for the past like 3 episodes. And I'm not sure why it took me so long, but it did. So, it is really funny because I'm literally doing the same thing that I've done with like the other houses in the other two villages that I've come up with. So I don't understand at all why this took me as long as it did. And there were so many different just like design things with this. Like, I don't like that. Oh, I think I like that. I want to keep that. Maybe I don't want to keep that. Just like constantly going back and forth between do I like that or not. And I really hated the look of that roof right there. I didn't like it at all, but I didn't like that either. Like what I do right here, I end up removing at this point because I'm like, ugh. And it went on and on and on. It was actually really funny at the time because I was talking to myself while I'm doing something. Like, I don't like that. I don't think that either. I don't like that either. I'm like, this looks like crap. That's like the way that I was talking to myself while I was building this. It was really funny. So, I started to get pretty comfortable with this at this point, though, this particular house, where it was like, yeah, I think I want to have this kind of have like a market look or just something that makes it a little bit more distinctive than what it currently is. And then was like, ooh, an awning. I don't know why the awning is there, but it's there. So we'll keep it. And yeah, it's kind of funny how much thought did and did not go into this at the same time. So also very different from the other 2 episodes, I did do a 2-story house first. Like, I'm not sure why I did that first, but I did. So, yeah, and, now that I'm looking back, okay, I did fix it. I was like, geez, I don't like that. I'm like, oh yeah, I fixed it. I was like, yeah, because just leaving that stair just, like, sticking out like that it's the sort of thing that would just drive me crazy. So, I'm glad that I fixed that, because if I had left that and then, publish this video with that there, I'd be like, ugh, why did I do that? But it's okay, I fixed it. So, yeah, and I decided to do birch flooring, by the way, because birch trees can be found in forests, so it just sort of made sense. But you guys will see in a second, these have quite the transformation in 3, 2, 1, go. Yeah, so things got a little bit different. I added in the unstripped oak, and I like it much better. I think it has more of a forest kind of look, a more of a wood look. I really wanted the stone and the wood to be the featured things here, but especially like the wood. It had to look wooden because, this is in a forest. Like, I can't stress that enough. And it's almost kind of funny the way that I keep stressing it, but, that played a huge part in how I did this. Now, I'm not sure why, but I decided there needed to be a park in this village. And maybe because we're going with the whole forest nature, wildlife, pretty decorativeness sort of a dealio, that's probably what my thought process was at the time. I do want to point out that I did build this like 4 weeks ago. So, I don't remember what I was thinking completely at the time. Like, I remember some things, but not all things. And like this, I don't know why I did this. I mean, I like it. Don't get me wrong on that. I like it a lot. I just don't remember why I did it. And I also don't remember and understand why I custom built a birch tree versus planting one, because there's really only one kind of birch tree that you're going to get when you plant it. You don't get like super crazy tall birch trees. You don't have that risk with birch trees like you do with oak trees. So I really don't understand why I took the time to build a vanilla tree when I could have just planted one and saved myself a lot of work. I mean, I decided to leave this clip in because, there's a pure sense of hilarity in me doing this, and I'm sure you guys are probably going to think it's absolutely hilarious, or you won't, but hopefully you do. And just, I also wanted you guys to see how much work I put in. That was like, you know what, I'm going to build my own tree. I'm going to build a tree. I mean, look at how much thought I'm putting into this tree. Like, I'm really taking my time with this to make sure that this looks like a vanilla Minecraft tree. And again, I have no idea why I did this. But I feel like it's pretty believable. I mean, it's not the most believable thing I've ever done, but it's pretty believable. It looks legit. So, yeah, I built a vanilla tree instead of planting one. And then I just sat there and kind of admired it for a moment. So, yeah, and I also decided to plant some dandelions around it because I thought that would just be really adorable. So, yeah, there we go. The park. Despite the fact that I built this up against water, when I initially started this building, I really had no idea what I wanted it to be. And it does turn out to be a fisherman, but I didn't know that at the time of building it. I was just like, I'm going to make a building, and it's going to be a building, and when I'm done with it, I'll decide what will go inside of it. And it wasn't until we get to the point where I'm actually doing interiors when I decided what I wanted this to be. And it's also really funny because I think at one point, if I remember right, I was thinking about having some kind of like little dock on one side, like jutting off into the water with the intent for this to be a fisherman. And then it just didn't happen, which is kind of funny. And it's possible that maybe I had decided at some point that I wasn't going to do a fisherman and might have been considering like a shepherd or something like that. But that didn't happen either. And, it's really funny with this way to go up here because there's literally nothing that gets put on the roof of this building at all. Which, again, I'm not sure why I did that. But there's a lot of things that happen with this build that I'm really not sure why I did a lot of them. And it's not because I built this like a month ago. I think it's because it's just the way that my brain was working at the time when I created this. There was a lot of thought that went into it, but not in the way that maybe you guys would expect. And this was a point in time when I decided, I really want something decorative on these buildings rather than just, it looking kind of plain. I wanted it to be a little bit nicer in a sense than, the typical vanilla buildings. You know what I mean? Like I wanted it to still look like it could be in vanilla Minecraft, but I also wanted it to be a little bit more decorative. Especially because the vanilla buildings are really nice. They really are. They look way better than they did when villages were first added into the game. So I kind of wanted to, make things look pretty. Things can be in vanilla Minecraft and still be really decorative. So yeah, I think now that I'm seeing the wool, that probably is like an indicator that I was intending for this to be a shepherd. But in the end, it becomes a fisherman. Yeah, I really don't understand my thought process behind that. The more that I watch it, I'm like, I don't know what was going on. So here is the weaponsmith, aka the blacksmith, and this is sped up heavily because building this took way longer than it may seem, and there's actually a point in time when I make like a significant mistake here, which you guys will probably notice soon. Especially when I go to examine the windows and the window placement. Yeah, you can probably see there that the floor of the house part is not aligned with the floor of the workstation. And it took me a little while to notice that I had made that mistake. So I basically had to like build this building twice. Like the part with the lava is perfectly fine, but the house part is just really messed up. Like, it really just needed to be a little, like, one block higher, and then it would have been fine. Like, right there was when I was like, "Oh, crap." Um, so, yeah, I had to, like, rebuild the whole thing, and I was like, "Yeah, it's fine. We'll just, do a sunken-in floor." And I'm like, "Yeah, this is stupid. No, don't do that. Don't do that at all. That's ridiculous. Don't, mess it up like that." And so I just made the roof a little bit higher, and then it was fine. But it was just really funny because it's like I'm amazed at myself that I made that mistake, but at the same time I have a tendency to make mistakes like that when I'm building. And so yeah, but I actually really like the way that this came out in the end. Like I really like the look of it, once I fixed it. I'm actually really happy with it. And so yeah, I do like the Weaponsmith a lot. It was really hard for me to build, but I do like it quite a bit. And I also really wanted to incorporate the unpolished andesite into this part of the blacksmith because I feel like it kind of would give this a bit more texture and a bit more depth, make it a little bit more visually interesting than just a wall of polished andesite because that can be a little much and a bit repetitive, and I really didn't want it to look like that. So in the end, yeah, I'm really happy with this one. Unlike the Fisherman, I went into the library build knowing that I wanted it to be a library. The only thing that was kind of difficult for me was that I couldn't get beyond the traditional vanilla Plains Village library look. And I really did not do a particularly good job of getting around that. If you get what I'm saying. Like I was stuck on that and I made it look like that and that's what it became. And it really wasn't going to be anything other than that, which doesn't make this building a failure, but it definitely makes this building not particularly unique. So, really, the only thing that is going to make this building kind of unique looking is the fact that I incorporated some stained glass at one point. At least I'm pretty sure I did. And that made it pretty interesting, but otherwise, this is very modular. This is my typical build style of way that I go about things, and this is how it ended up. And I mean, it does fit with the rest of the styling of the village. It's just very Plains Village looking. Like it looks like it should be in a Plains Village, not a forest village. Now, that being said, I do like the fact that it is an L shaped building, and I like the fact that it's kind of big in comparison to the other buildings because I feel like a library should be a sizable building in a village. I mean, they kind of always have been traditionally in this game that the library is a bit bigger than other buildings, and that sort of makes sense. I mean, books take up a lot of room, so a library should be big. And I don't think anyone here watching this video has ever seen a small library, if you get what I'm saying. I Every library I've ever been in my entire life has been relatively large. Like even what's considered to be the smallest library is still really large. So I felt like that was something that just sort of made sense. Yeah, so I skipped over doing the whole roof because roofs stair roofs in this game are a pain in the butt. Let's put it that way. So at this point I was just trying to like find ways to make this look like a library in a forest village, and that's where the stained glass came into play. And it's the only part of the entire village, I think, that uses the blue stained glass, except for maybe the church. The church might be the only one that other building that uses it. So, if you didn't already know, because I didn't realize this, the lectern is in redstone for some reason. It's categorized as a redstone block. It's a job block, but it's in redstone. And I would really like to know why that is. So if you guys could enlighten me on that, I would really appreciate it because I don't think redstone when I think of a lectern. I think of like decorative, you know what I'm saying, or miscellaneous even, but not redstone. Yeah, that didn't look good. So we didn't do that. But in any case, I quite liked this though, having just this wall of books right here. I thought that just looked like really cool. So yeah, I felt like the lectern was just kind of sitting there sort of plain, but I couldn't really think of anything to put around it that would make it less plain looking. So yeah, that's where this carpet came in, and I have no idea why I did that, but it just I know that the vanilla buildings always look kind of, for lack of a better term, plain, and I just didn't want it to be plain. I wanted it to be decorative. I wanted it to have some, decorative oomph and not be so just like, yeah, it's a building with nothing in it. You know what I mean? I just wanted it to look really nice. So that's what I did. And I really like the hanging lanterns too, by the way, in there. I think it gives it a very like high ceiling, huge, grand, beautiful library. I don't know. It's just there was something about it that I felt made it look really, really nice. And once I added in the awnings, I started to feel really good about this looking a bit distinctive as the library. It still looks like something that you should find in a Plains village, but it looks enough like the library, in my opinion. It looks distinctive enough where it's okay. It's not the best, but it's okay. So I wanted to point out that I did put trees back in, even though I did have to remove trees. I put them back in so that we could have, a forest around this forest village because that just sort of made sense. So that's what I did. And right in this spot right here, I ended up building another two-story house. And it actually ends up becoming the Fletcher, as a matter of fact, and it's very difficult to get to, as you can see. But yeah, this one and the other one, they both become Fletchers. So this village actually has like two Fletcher houses, which is not outside the ordinary. A lot of vanilla villages are like that. But yeah, that's what I did. I rewatched this time lapse of me building this cleric before I started recording myself because I couldn't remember how I built this at all. And I didn't want to go in recording my voice over this and not knowing what to say. So, it really doesn't look like this was hard for me to build, but it was. And it's based on a design that's in already existing vanilla villages, but it was still really, really hard for me to build this. It looks so much easier because of the time lapse than it really was. And I think the biggest thing was because of having, this tower in the center and connecting it with a roof. And it was just like so hard to map this out and make it work and not look ridiculous. And it was all about the height of walls in relation to the ceiling. So there were a lot of things that needed to be fixed repeatedly, which is kind of the same problem that I had when I was building the Weaponsmith. I seemed to have a lot of difficulty on that day with putting things where they're supposed to go. And it was at this point when I also realized that the windows were uneven, painfully uneven, and it did not look good. And I was like, how do I fix it? It's like, you just move it up one block. That's all you have to do to fix it. You just move it up one block. For some reason, that was a challenge for me. So I'm glad that I put this in time lapse because this is sped up by like 4 times in Movie Maker. Just so you know. Because if I had not sped it up, this would not have looked good. And to connect the weaponsmith with the rest of the village, I decided I was going to do the stone slab roof to connect those 2 buildings together, but also make the weaponsmith look like it belonged here. And I really did not like this slab roof flooring. I really didn't like it, but it is what it is. It would have looked terrible if I didn't put that in. So, yeah, and I don't think that the villagers can actually get to that bell. So, the bell is purely decorative. But what's kind of funny about it is I do add in a bell later to make it a bit more, something that the villagers can actually have and use, because they do need to actually have that. So that's what I did. I'm going to be completely honest with you guys right now. I'm kind of running out of things to say. At the time when I built these, I really was thinking that these farms were large enough, but they're really not. They're definitely too small in comparison to vanilla village farms, so I kind of messed that up quite a bit. Also, there's a big problem with these farms, and it's that the villagers can't actually get on top of the farm, which I noticed later when I placed the villagers in. I was like, well, that's just kind of... We're just gonna pretend like it's a Minecraft glitch. So, yeah, I definitely feel like I messed these farms up. I just keep looking, I'm like, yeah, this is totally not enough farmland for these villagers. There isn't a 10-ton that I can say about the animal pen. Other than I chose pigs because I had already done sheep in the shepherd in the cave village and horses in the mesa village. So I wanted to do a different animal, and I didn't want to do cows. And I felt like the pigs were just the right choice. And I don't know why they felt like they were the right choice. They just sort of did. I was like, let's do a small animal instead of... I don't want to do sheep again, and I don't want to do cows because they just kind of don't make sense. So let's do pigs. And that's how that happened. And I do like this animal pen a lot. I like the styling of it. I think it's really adorable. And, there was something about it that just worked, in my opinion. So there it is. So at one point in time, I had built a second tree, or like a second park, and then I was like, this is too much tree in the forest village, as weird as that may sound. And I was like, we need to have a bell in the village center. So at this point, I really wanted the village center to be a combination of tree, leather worker, well sort of dealio, and a bell. And that's how this happened. And I actually really like having this here quite a bit. You'll see in a second, I do remove the, um, what do you call them? Trapdoors. Because, with the trapdoors there, the villagers can't really get to the bell, so they can't be there, and they don't need to be there anyways because they're not surrounding a tree. Um, it's also really funny because I kept bumping into that leaf block, and I wasn't realizing that that leaf block was there despite how many times I kept bumping into it. And it's like, just remove the leaf block. And I think it took me a while to actually realize that that leaf block needed to be removed. And like, that's the point I finally got to. I'm like, oh yeah, I should probably deal with that. So, at this point, it was just a lot of decorative stuff. Like, how do I want this to look? Does that look good? No, it doesn't, because this isn't a forest and it needs to be pretty and nice and forest looking and naturey, and it's got to have all that, pretty decorative goodness. So, yeah, and I still put the dandelions around because I just felt like they looked absolutely adorable and I felt like they really worked. So, one of two really important things to add into this village is the interiors and the job locks. And this was something that was a lot of fun for me to do, but it was also like really easy at the same time because by this point I knew exactly what I wanted all of these buildings to be, Fisherman included. So, this was me just going around and doing the thing. And it really does truly drive me nuts that the brewing stand can't be placed on top of a block. That will never not drive me nuts. So, yeah, and the interior of the church is just really, really barren. That's the only problem with this whole interior thing. Like, the library's so finished looking, and the church is just like, yeah, there's just a brewing stand sitting on the floor, and that's basically it. Like, I think I went back in at one point and put in, like, seating or something to make it look like it's actually a communal building. And, did that, but I think I did that, like, 2 weeks after I built this. So, yeah, and I also went with green and brown um beds, and I felt like that just looked really good to have the green and brown in there, considering that this is in a forest. So, yeah, and I decided no bed in there because it just didn't make any sense. And another bed in there, and unlike the other two videos, I really did try to not have chests in every single building because that's just so silly. So, yeah, that's how that happened. And yeah, the interiors are a bit simpler than even vanilla buildings. Now that I'm looking at it, and I'm like, I could have probably put more furniture and whatnot inside of here because vanilla buildings do have a lot of furniture in them, and I'm not really sure why that happened, but it's okay. So yeah, I wanted a lot of the houses to have like saplings and wood and crops and things like that. I felt like those would be the really cool loot type items to have in the interiors, or in the loot chests. I don't know why. I just felt like it just sort of made sense because this is a forest. It is a little difficult, I'll be completely honest, for me to talk about the interiors and whatnot because again, I don't remember what I was thinking at the time when I did it. So I'm just sort of assuming that my thought process was geared toward a forest because it just makes sense for me to do it that way. That's sort of the way that my brain works, and I am the ultimate authority on the way that my brain works. So I feel like that's probably the way that I went about it. I don't think that the loot chests make this village any more or less beneficial to the player than any other village would be. So it's just sort of, this is the way that I did things. Obviously, the Fletcher's going to have the materials for an arrow. The library is going to have books, paper, and leather because that just makes sense. So that's that's the way that I went with that. And this last loot chest is the Weaponsmith, and I felt like this was just the most appropriate. Also, I wanted to get some gold in there. So, there you go. So while I am putting in all of the inhabitants, I do want to share with you guys my final thoughts on this village and the series in general, because this is the last video in this trilogy within this series. It's not the last video of Build Plus. There's going to be more Build Plus, but it is the last video of the village series. So I like this village a lot. I like the styling of it. I think it looks good, based on my own aesthetic. However, out of all three villages that I made, this one, in my opinion, feels the least like a vanilla village. I think this one is where I got lost in the aesthetics and didn't really stick to the purpose of making a vanilla looking village. Like, certain things in this are great and other things just don't work. I think you guys can kind of understand based on my commentary up to this point what I'm referring to. So, for me personally, the Mesa Village is definitely the most successful and the most vanilla looking, and the Cave Village is kind of like right in the middle, and this one is definitely not that. Now, I really don't understand why the librarian didn't want to be a librarian and why this librarian did. I don't get it. This guy decided he was going to be the fisherman, and that is fine. So, he can be the fisherman. But yeah, so that's basically my final thoughts on this whole project. I have to say, I think this village looks really good with shaders on. I think it's really cute, and I think it does have some potential to it. So I'm really happy with it, all things considered. And if you guys want to recommend a specific type of thing for this series for me to build, let me know in the comment section. So I want to thank all of you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, then feel free to subscribe, comment, and like if you want to see more. And as always, I will see you guys next time.